400 subscribers special, people. Thank you all. Thank you all 400 of you that have subscribed. It really means a lot. Thank you so much. And don't go away, because a lot of great content's still going to be coming your way. That kind of almost rhymed. Anyways, my top 20 favorite movies. Originally pitched to be my top 10 favorites, but when I was writing out the list, I just couldn't narrow it down less. These 20 are just absolutely great movies in my eyes. I mean, you may not like them, that's fine. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinion, but these are just my favorites. And one on here is kind of cheating, but you'll see later. So, bear in mind, these aren't what I think to be the greatest movies of all time, not like golden cinema, Citizen Kane style, which, by the way, Citizen Kane is not on here. These are just the top 20 movies that I enjoy the most. Every single one of these movies I could watch again, and again, and again, and again, and not get tired of them. Also, my taste in movies is very strange. It's not that I have one set genre I like, although I do really like animation and comedy, specifically, but really, it's strange how I pick how I like my movies. It's either I like them or I don't. But I tend to find more movies I like than don't, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the 20 movies that I enjoy the most, or my top 20 favorite movies. There will also be some honorable mentions, so stay tuned for that after the number 1 slot. So, let's go. Number 20, Batman. Tim Burton's Batman, not The Dark Knight. The 1989 film that revived the comic book, this is the one. Now, I myself am not a giant comic book fan. I haven't really read very many, except for like Spawn, which I have read off and on throughout the years, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Batman! This was a very ambitious movie, to say the least. Casting Michael Keaton as Batman, a lot of people thought that was not going to work, but it turned out very, very well. Probably one of the best Batmans. I mean, definitely better than George Clooney. Anyone knows that. He's able to pull off Bruce Wayne in a very great way. Like, he's got a lot of personality, a lot of charisma, but then when he's Batman, he completely changes the role than when he is as Bruce. And he's subtle, he's mysterious, he's silent, but he gets the job done. And of course, Jack Nicholson as the Joker. Amazing Joker. Fantastic. He lives for chaos. He lives for anarchy. He's absolutely insane, off the walls. Totally the Joker from the comics. Like, you see him on screen, and you know that this is the Joker from Batman the Animated Series, which has not yet come out. The comics, even the Cesar Romero guy from the 1960s Batman, he encompasses so many different versions of the Joker, and he's able to make it his own. He's such an enjoyable part of this movie. Tim Burton, this was one of his first, if not his first movie. And he did a great job with this, and it turned out to be a rousing success. One thing to note, though, is that the Joker kind of gets more of the spotlight in this movie. Batman is, of course, kept in the shadows. He's a lot more mysterious. He's a lot more quiet. And then there's the Joker, who's loud, bombastic, and hogs all the spotlight. So he kind of does get more of a focus, though. Either way, this movie is great. The action scenes are fantastic. Lots of practical effects. I don't think really any CG was used. It's a very entertaining comic book movie, and a whole lot of fun the whole way through. Sorry if this part was a little short, but don't worry, as we get down the line, there's going to be a lot more to talk about. Number 19, the first 4 Harry Potter movies. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's/Philosopher's Stone, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This isn't necessarily what I consider to be cheating, because, well, it's part of the Harry Potter saga, but now, I myself am a Harry Potter fan. I'm not one of those diehard people that know, like, every single thing about every single element of every single book. That's that guy, not me. You know, the guy who went to see Kubo with me? That one. So, but I do really like Harry Potter. It's a very great story with great characters, a very in-depth world, and a great ride at Universal Studios. Go now. I wish I was paid to say that. But the first 4 movies are easily my favorite. Now, let me get this out of the way. I didn't read all the Harry Potter books, but I did read the books for these 4. And in fact, I'm finishing Goblet of Fire right now. But what makes me like these 4 over the next 4, I guess, because Deathly Hallows will split into 2, well, it's a little interesting. I'll get to that when I'm done with each one. So, I really like what I'm just gonna call it Sorcerer's Stone because that's what it's called over here. In Sorcerer's Stone, it's really lighthearted, it's really fun, but it also has a great feeling of severity when it really needs to. Chris Columbus did an amazing job directing, and I really think that his direction and the tone that he used for this was the great way to introduce people to Harry Potter series, in cinema form, of course, because the book came out earlier. But it's so bright, it's so colorful, it's so energetic and optimistic, but it can also just, on a dime, change and become dark and brooding and mysterious and evil at times. The moods in every single scene are captured perfectly, and the casting, of course, is great. I know the child acting isn't always the greatest, but you can't tell me that Alan Rickman wasn't a good Snape. You can't say that the original Dumbledore was the better one. I'm sorry, I mean, I know the guy who came later did a good job, but this guy's just perfect, just like in the book. Everything around this just really does its absolute best to bring the book to life. And actually, I think it's one of the most faithful, if not the most faithful adaptation in the series. Chamber of Secrets, I don't really get why people don't like this one as much. I mean, yes, it's a little tonally confused because, as I said, Sorcerer's Stone does get dark at times. This one, it balances the lighthearted, charming side that Sorcerer's Stone had, but also adds a lot more of the dark, grisly, horrible nature that it had towards the latter parts. It mixes it throughout. Maybe that's what people don't like, but I think it's really good. It was the first Harry Potter thing I ever saw. Definitely not a good one to start off with because I had no idea what was going on, but either way, it's really good. It's a really investing story. It introduces Parseltongue. Dobby is, of course, a great pleasure to see, and Gilderoy Lockhart, one of my favorite characters just because he is so funny, so self-absorbed. He's so entertaining to watch. And like I said, I really like the tone this one has. And then Prisoner of Azkaban, everyone knows why this one works. The story is great. The acting is definitely gotten a lot better now that the kids are older. The tone is definitely shifting in this one. Although I do have a little nitpick that the colors start going away as the films get on to the point where it's pretty much all just gray, silvers, and blacks, and a little bit of red. But that's not important. This one really had a nice story, really good emotion. With the exception of the time turners, everything turned out really well. Goblet of Fire, now, from what I've talked to, I'm not saying this is a definite thing for the whole fandom, but people seem really split on this one. Because it seems like this is the one that really started to have some deviations from the book. But because I watched the movies first, that's probably why it doesn't bother me, but when I was younger, this was definitely my favorite of the movies. I really like the concept of the Triwizard Tournament. I thought they did a great job bringing it to life, even if they did change some stuff like the living maze or making Voldemort's reincarnation a little more cinematic. But hey, it's a movie and they're showing off CG and stuff. I mean, yeah, you can get a little mad at that and really cutting down the scene with Voldemort and Harry. But I really think this one did a great job. It has a lot of action, a lot of fun. Mad-Eye Moody, oh, you know he's great. It's just an all-around fun ride, but it definitely gets really dark in this one. And this is probably where it officially gets off the jumping point, and then from here on out, it gets insanely dark. Now, why do I like these four over the others? I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've known them the longest. Maybe it's because they have the best balance and tone before they just start getting all grisly and depressing. I mean, those movies are great and all, but it's something about these four that really, no pun intended, is magical. Something is really magical about the first one. You're seeing Hogwarts for the first time and getting introduced to the world, whether it be the good or the evil. The second one, you're finding out more about what goes on in there while still keeping that whimsical tone. Third one is pretty much a departure from that tone, and they're really starting to come to terms with, well, things like growing up and their past and memories and all that. And then, of course, the fourth one is just an all-out action-filled fun ride. So, not much else I can say about these. Next one. Number 18, Jonah, a VeggieTales movie. A little bit of a weird choice to put on my favorite movies list, but hey, as a lifelong VeggieTales fan and creator and head writer and star of VeggieTales Live Reloaded and Abridged, I kind of have to put this one on here. Now, I remember when I went to see this movie in the theaters, I think we went opening day, if not opening weekend, with our family friends who introduced us to VeggieTales, got down, sat in the middle row, and then we loved it, loved it, loved it. So much so that I actually wanted to go out and buy it right when we got out of the theater, but as a kid I didn't understand that when a movie is in the theaters, the VHS is not out yet, so I had to wait. But luckily, my grandma got me the VHS as soon as it came out, and I watched the heck out of it. And I still do today. It's a great movie. It tells the story of Jonah very faithfully. The humor is probably some of the best that VeggieTales has had in a long time. The songs, don't even get me started. Those things are so toe-tapping, so catchy, so energetic, so everything. Even the people that don't like the movie or just don't like VeggieTales in general because, well, for whatever reason, even they admit that the songs in this movie are great, especially God of Second Chances, which is probably the most popular song, even though they anticipated it to be Jonah Was a Prophet. Oh well. This was also an extremely ambitious project for Big Idea. The water is definitely one of the hardest, if not the hardest thing you can animate, and this movie is full of it, and they pulled off, well, it looks great. A lot of people say, oh, it doesn't look good compared to Pixar and Disney. Well, Big Idea is not Disney or Pixar. They're an independent studio, and this looks really good for them. The characters themselves, like Bob the Tomato, Archibald Asparagus, even Dad Asparagus, and, well, of course, Junior, they really get some more depth in learning about stuff. I mean, sure, Archibald plays Jonah, but even still, you can't tell me that there's a lot of Archibald coming in through Jonah. But anyways, these characters start getting a lot more developed. We learn about kind of Bob's really uptight nature. I mean, we've seen it before, but this is where we really get to see what extremes he can take it to. We get to see Dad Asparagus being a little bit more oblivious or a little more outgoing, kind of like the cool dad. We get to see more Junior and Laura's interaction and their friendship. The Pirates Who Don't Do Anything are a lot of fun. Khalil is a laugh riot. And the message of second chances and mercy is very good, especially in this day and age when people get angry over just the littlest things. Wouldn't be surprised if someone gets angry that I put this or any other movie on my list, or didn't put a movie on my list. It's something that is a really important message, and I think they tackled this a little bit better, actually a lot better, than when they taught forgiveness early on in God Wants Me to Forgive Them. Because the ways that they tackle it is very interesting, because Nineveh was a really bad city. Nineveh was disturbing, disgusting, vile, and they did all these terrible things, and they were spared. So if Nineveh can be spared, then why shouldn't we spare each other for far lesser things like that? And it goes into many different angles, again, like with Bob and Dad Asparagus, or Junior and Laura, and so much more. I've already talked a lot about this movie in my top 10 VeggieTales episodes list. Spoiler alert, it's on there. So if you want to hear me talk about it more, just go there. So this is the one I was talking about that was kind of cheating. I couldn't decide between these two movies, and they're both from the same company, so I just decided why not put them at the same rank. At number 17, we have a tie between Toy Story 2 and Inside Out. Yes, these are my favorite Pixar movies, so I just decided to put them up here. Everyone knows why Toy Story 2 is a great movie. It was a great sequel that surpassed the original. It had an amazing animation for its time. It introduced classic characters like Bullseye, Jessie, and even the Prospector, even though he didn't really come back. It had a great story that was a continuation rather than just a repeat of the original. It had really good emotion, like with Jessie's backstory and even some of what the Prospector had to go through. It also dealt with themes of like the kids growing up and how the toys deal with it. It was really funny, it was emotional, and actually I just finished watching it a couple hours ago. Not for the first time, but just for a rewatch. Talking about it is very difficult because everybody knows why it works. Everybody's talked about it ad nauseum, so it's not going to get any better for Inside Out. Pixar's most recent and probably only good movie since 2010. Nothing against Finding Dory, I just thought it was okay. But Inside Out was a very unique kind of movie for many reasons. For one, it was unique because it was the first good Pixar movie in a long, long time. You see, after Toy Story 3 came out, there were movies like Cars 2, Monsters University, Brave. Those movies were not very good. I mean, granted, they weren't like sins against cinema, but none of them were very good. They didn't make it nearly as much money. So Pixar was kind of in a hole. So they took a break to kind of reform themselves and then came out with Inside Out. And it was very, very, very good. We all know what it's about. Inside this girl Riley's head, there are 5 different emotions that control her moves, her mood, anything really. And then, of course, 2 of them get lost, and then they have to find their way back and it's, like, perfectly parallels the not subplot, but another story happening where Riley is moving, and, of course, the emotions that are left kind of help hinder that process of making her adjust well. So, yes, everybody's talked about this one too, so you all know why it works. I'm pretty sure you've seen it by this point. If you haven't, go ahead and see it. This one's got really strong emotion in it too. Especially when characters have to, go away. They stay gone, even though in this one there actually would be a viable way to bring them back. It's good that they stuck to their guns and just decided to not bring them back. Very gutsy of them. The creativity in this movie is amazing. The humor is also very good. The personalities of the emotions, or the emotions of the emotions, are very well done. Joy is always upbeat, optimistic, and she's kind of like SpongeBob, classic SpongeBob a little bit. And it makes you really excited just by watching her. Anger is hilarious, probably my favorite. Fear is just a neurotic who can't stand anything and so paranoid. Disgust is a valley girl. And then sadness is basically half the millennial population. And then, of course, they go along their way and they meet a lot of colorful characters. It's so hard to talk about this one because we all know why it works. We all know these movies. We've seen them all, and we're probably going to keep seeing them again. I know I will. Next one. Number 16, Addams Family Values. This might be a little bit of a weird one to put on my favorite movies list, but hey, it's one of my favorite movies and it's my list, so yeah. Now, I've been a fan of the Addams Family for quite a while. It's my favorite black and white TV show, and every incarnation, with the exception of the new Addams Family, brings something new and exciting and really helps bring the characters to life. Whether it be the original black and white show, the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, the other cartoon that came out, or the movies. Personally, I like this one a bit better than the first one. Not to say that the first one is bad, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but this one really has something unique to it. And it also has one quality I like, is that we get Fester throughout the whole thing. Not Gordon pretending to be Fester like in the other one, spoiler alert. Actually, it's not a spoiler, because you know the story of that one, probably, because it's in the title description on IMDb or Wikipedia. That's not important. So this one is actually also not a rehash. It's not somebody dressing up as like cousin Id or something and trying to steal all the Addams Family gold, gold, gold. It's actually a very nice story for the Addams Family. That Gomez and Morticia have a new son. Wednesday and Pugsley want to get rid of him, and then when they are too busy to care for the kid 24/7, they hire a nanny who is actually a psychotic, deranged killer / gold digger who takes an eye out for Fester. Then they get together, and then a whole bunch of crazy stuff starts happening from there. And Wednesday and Pugsley get sent off to a summer camp because they become too suspicious of her. Now, one thing at a time. The villain in this movie, played by Joan Cusack, is great. She's psychotic, she's loud, she's bombastic, but yet she's also subtle and manipulative, but also like really obvious in her subtlety. I know that's kind of contradictory, but you kind of have to see the movie to understand, and her motivation for why she does all this is hilarious. I don't want to ruin it, but just if you ever want to see the movie, which I highly recommend, that part is one of the best parts. And of course we get to see more of a relationship between Gomez and Fester, but also with the rest of the family too, because the main part of the first movie was basically Gomez and Fester, quote unquote, interacting with each other and finding out their history and their relationship. With this one, we don't just see Gomez, although that one is a major force in the movie, but we get to see what it's like with the rest of the family. And of course, Lurch gets a bigger role. I mean, not much bigger than in the first one, but hey, he's my favorite character and I'll take what I can get. But what makes this movie great, like really great, is the subplot with Wednesday and Pugsley at summer camp. Think of it. The gloomy, miserable Wednesday and the crazed Pugsley at a summer camp that is basically all chipper, happy, song and dance. It is so funny the way that contrast with them, and just don't buy into all the propaganda that's going in them and this one other kid who's okay. And then like even the camp is like kind of crazy. It's like this supremacist movement, sort of like all the white popular kids are always on top, and then the minority like kids with issues or something are always treated like crap. And then there's all the stuff like Wednesday pretending she can't swim, so the other person sinks to the bottom of the lake and pretty much almost drowns. And then like, okay, it's really hard to give away all the details because they're so great, and I don't want to ruin the movie. And what can I say? The casting is great in this one. I never thought that Christopher Lloyd would have been a good Uncle Fester, because normally Fester kind of sounds like this. So when I saw that Christopher Lloyd was playing him, I got a little confused, but he makes a great Fester. He's furtive, he's manic, he's got even a great voice for it. It's his normal voice, but still. And this film especially brings the Addams Family cartoons to life. Or the show, because, well, the comic or slash cartoon came out first, but it's not important. The first one did a great job, but this one just keeps continuing with it. It builds even more and more of what goes on inside this crazy house. What can I say? It's the Addams Family. Addams Family Values, to be specific. And if I were you, I'd go see it. Number 15, The Thief and the Cobbler, Recobbled Cut. I've talked about this film in a very, very old review of mine that I'm not very proud of, but here's the basic concept. A man named Richard Williams spent 33 years trying to perfect his masterpiece, this amazing feat of animation that was unlike anything else the world has ever seen. However, because it took too long to complete, it was taken over by a completion bond company who fired him and then spent more money rather than just finishing it to rework it and make it more commercially acceptable. In other words, make it a ripoff of Aladdin, put in a bunch of really cheap animation to replace some of the really good stuff, add really bad songs, and of course the embarrassing voiceovers of Matthew Broderick and Jonathan Winters. So that version of The Thief and the Cobbler has been reviled and has since become pretty much extinct when it comes to store shelves. And then in 2006, a bunch of Richard Williams fans came out, found one of his old work prints, and have since started to fix it up a bit. And then that is what we call the Recobbled Cut. It is basically the closest thing we're going to get to seeing The Thief and the Cobbler in its entirety. Now, the story itself is nothing special. There's a city with 3 golden balls on the top of the highest minaret that protects it from evil, and then when they get stolen, everything goes downhill. The story itself is nothing special. The script is very basic, and then, of course, all the actors do a good job, with the exception of Vincent Price, who is phenomenal as Zigzag. But what really makes this film amazing is the animation. It's, like I said, unlike anything the world has ever seen before it. The attention to detail with this, the amazing backgrounds, the colors, it all looks fantastic. Whether it be the backgrounds being optical illusions or just insane detail, like down to the most minuscule little element. You could just freeze frame any moment in this movie and just stare at the backgrounds for about like 15 minutes. They're that good. And of course the animation is extremely fluent, it moves very well, especially at the end with the giant one-eye machine, when the thief is trying to take the golden balls back, and the whole thing is just crumbling right in front of him. That is an extended scene of kinetic energy that goes on for about 20 minutes. Now, in the Miramax version, which is the recut version, that thing was only about, 10 minutes most. But this, you really get to see the all-out insanity that probably made this film take a lot longer than it needed to be. And Richard Williams, the guy who made this, was an extreme perfectionist, so he wouldn't let mediocrity or even just good slide. Everything had to be absolutely perfect. And the biggest showcase for this is to look up the chase scene where the thief steals a shoe and Tack, the cobbler, is trying to chase him down. You just watch that scene, you're going to know what this movie is about. It's not about the story, it's not about the characters, it's about the animation. And what a great art form it could be. This was a film that tried to take what animation could do and push it extremely far. Something that no one has ever done before. Sadly, it doesn't look like we'll ever be able to see it in its completion because the project is now over. Because Miramax tried to shut it down and it looks like they worked. But for now, whether or not it is going to be finished, we still have the recobbled cut to enjoy what could have been an amazing animated experience. And for what it is, it's phenomenal. Number 14, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. This one may actually be a little bit surprising to you people, because I have bashed this movie repeatedly for its very poor representation of the beloved Roald Dahl book. But, as I've said many times in the same videos, I really do love this movie. While it absolutely fails as an adaptation of the book, it's a good movie regardless. It's a very charming movie. It's got a lot of really bright colors, great sets and costumes for the time. The acting is really good, even from the kids, even though some of them may get a little annoying. Of course, Gene Wilder is absolutely amazing as Willy Wonka. Like I said, the kid actors are great too, whether they be Charlie, Veruca, or the kid I like to call Not Quite Mike TV. All of them put their own little spins on the characters and do very nice things. Of course, the songs are absolutely great. Even though the Oompa Loompa songs repeat, they're very good songs on their own. Cheer Up Charlie, I Got a Golden Ticket, The Candyman, all of them. They're all great. Every single one. And the dialogue in this one actually is pretty funny. Like Mr. Wonka insulting Mr. Salt's buoyancy, as he puts it. And then, of course, there's the part where Mr. Gloop eats the microphone. That part makes me laugh out loud every single time. Mr. Beauregard, need I say more, he is just a fantastic character. He is absolutely hilarious, every single thing he does. And if they remade this movie, because I keep saying the new one is not a remake, it's just another adaptation. If they ever decided to specifically remake this one, I could definitely see like Jim Carrey or Steve Carell playing him. He is so over-the-top, cartoonish, high energy, and I love him so much. And it does tell a very nice story with a simple message, but it's still really nice. It's definitely a feel-good movie. It's all about joy, optimism, and pure imagination, of course. And then, of course, there is the tunnel scene, which is delightfully insane. And this is a little bit of a weird thing to talk about, but the score is a very nice score. You know, like the background music. Even though a lot of it are remixes of I Got a Golden Ticket and Pure Imagination, the instrumentals themselves, not even just for the songs, but it's very nice. It really helps with the mood, and it really helps things just really set you into this world. All the characters except for Veruca, of course, as she's the villain, all of them are really lovable. This movie is really good, but of course, I have said many times I do like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory better, which, spoiler alert, is going to show up on this list at some point. I've talked about this one quite a bit in the past. What more is there to say except it's Willy Wonka, a land of pure imagination, but not quite the land of Roald Dahl. Number 13, The Mask. Yes, The Mask. You know that Jim Carrey movie that was really popular in the 90s when it came out? Yeah, I can definitely say that it deserved its reputation and popularity. So, this movie was based off a comic book, for those who don't know, and the comic book is messed up, to say the least. It was pretty intense. I haven't read a ton of it, but I definitely know about the reputation it has, but I'm not really going to talk about it very much, because this movie doesn't quite follow the comics very much. It more just takes it in a different direction. Direction being something that is completely fun and dark still. I mean, yes, it's still very dark, but when you compare it to the comic, not so much. So I won't really be talking about it from there. One of the things I really like about The Mask is Jim Carrey's acting in this. We get to see him play both of the characters that he plays very well, whether it be the weird, quirky, straight guy like Stanley Ipkiss, or the hyperbolic maniac like The Mask. Both of these are very well portrayed, and both of them have a lot of diversity, and each one is entertaining to watch. When the Stanley's on screen, you really want to see what he's going through. When The Mask is on stage, you want to see what he's going to make other people go through. What makes the movie great, especially though, is the Mask character, or being, or whatever you call it, himself. He's pretty much what you would get if you got a cartoon character from the 40s, pulled him out of the TV, and painted him green. He has no rules, no limits. Anything that goes through his head happens. He's basically like the genie from Aladdin, but without a moral compass. Any sick, twisted thing that comes into his mind, he's gonna do. Granted, he mostly errs on the side of good, but he still has a little bit of a wicked side to him, to say the least. Every scene with the character is extremely fun to watch. Some of my favorites being, of course, when he's fighting off the gangsters in the nightclub, when he's sneaking through the hall and then runs into his landlord. So many things like that. It's all great. The only real downside I can say is that the villain is kind of weak, and then when he gets a hold of the mask, it just kind of gets lame. But the rest of the movie is a lot of fun, a lot of really good stuff, but definitely not something that younger kids should watch. It definitely earns the PG-13 ranking. What else can I say about this movie is smoking! Number 12, Captain Phillips. One of the more recent movies on this list, not the most, but still pretty recent. This movie was definitely really, really big when it came out. And for good reason, it's very good. Obviously, as I put it on this list. Tom Hanks does a great job playing the character. In fact, sometimes I even forget it's him. The Somali actors are fantastic. They're a bunch of newbie actors. I don't think they've really been in anything before. And they all do a great job, especially Barakat Abdi, the guy who plays Muse, the head pirate. Which, it looked like he had a really good career going, but then a bunch of money issues really helped stop that, unfortunately. But oh well, he does a great job in this movie. He plays the character very menacingly, very anger-filled, but also this layer of complexity with him. Like, he doesn't quite want to do it because, well, the warlord of this part of Somalia is forcing him to do it, but he knows it's a job, and if he doesn't do it, he's going to get killed. The action of this movie is very well done. It's shot very well. When I saw it on the big screen, and it really helped immerse you in there, the way that they shoot it when they're on the water. From what I can tell, it's a very good representation of the movie, with the exception of apparently Captain Phillips himself wasn't so brave when they first met the pirates. Other than that, from what I can tell, it was a very accurate representation of it. Now, this is an intense movie, like really intense. When you see it for the first time like I did, and you don't know the story, well, you know how it's going to end, but you don't know what specific turns it's going to take and what actually happened. It is an intense, it's like a thriller almost. You really want him to get out, but you know that he's going to in the end, because, that was on the news and everything, but it gets, what happens and the mood it sets. The mood is really important, whether it just be the ambiance and stuff, or the setting, it's all great. And of course, there's this one character who actually was a real person, one of the young pirates there. He was 17 at the time, and he was dragged on there, and they don't really get to explore his character very much, but that is a really interesting fact that a lot of young kids about the age of 15, 16, 17, they are forced to go into that horrible career of thievery and piracy. One other weird reason why I really like this movie is because this is a kind of a weird thing. Like I said, I have a fascination with the country of Somalia. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the ethnic people, maybe it's the language, their culture, or just how crazy everything is down there. But I find it to be really fascinating. And I even know some of the language, too. I don't know why, just, hey, everyone needs a hobby, right? It's really interesting there, and the scenes in the village, there aren't very many, but the scenes that they show in the village from where the pirates come from, those are very well shot, very well done scenes. If I'm not mistaken, they may have actually filmed it there, because it does look like it. This movie is an intense, non-stop momentum of action, and that's definitely something to see. Just make sure you're ready, though. Number 11, The Three Amigos. This one my dad introduced me to when I was in 6th grade or so, and I've been watching it a lot ever since. Now, I don't really know if this is a very well-known movie, so I'll just explain what the story is. And then, when I explain the story, you'll probably know why it's really funny. 3 bad silent film actors, played by Chevy Chase, Martin Short, and Steve Martin, are fired from their studio, but then They think they're getting the job of a lifetime when they are invited to the Mexican city of Santapolco to go put on a show with this mysterious El Guapo, who they think is a great actor. However, the people of Santapolco saw their films, and they think they're real heroes, and El Guapo is actually a madman warlord who's trying to destroy the city. So they think the amigos are heroes, and the amigos think that the people of Santapolco are all people who are working on a movie, and that the bandits and the warlords, that they're all just actors. Now do you see why I really like this movie? It is really, really funny. Just all the jokes they say off of of how they're going to be heroes or what they're going to spend their money on, or just, of course, when they think that it's actually when they think it's a movie. Of course, the best scene is when they find out it's not a movie. And then the second half is about them realizing it's not a movie and then actually trying to be heroes for real. I do wish that it would have been more about them thinking it was a movie and just waiting till they find out to be in the last third instead of pretty much the midway point. But I still think it's really good. The second half still has a lot of good parts, with the invisible swordsman, the singing bush, and of course the plethora of weapons if you've seen the movie. And there's also there's so many great scenes, and it's really hard to talk about because, again, I don't want to ruin it. Just, these characters are so hilarious, and they're well developed too. Steve Martin's character is the tough, dependable leader with the ego the size of Canada. Martin Short's character is the good-hearted but still not very experienced young guy. And then Chevy Chase's character is just the weirdo who has no sense of anything. One of my favorite lines, and my dad's too, we always quote this out of context, especially when we go to Mexican restaurants, is, they're in Mexico, so they're eating food, and when the people who are hosting them say that they're so happy to have them in their home, Chevy Chase turns to them and asks, "Do you guys have anything here besides Mexican food?" That's one of my favorite lines in the movie, just especially with the context. The acting is great, the action scenes are great, the writing is very, very well done. What can I say? But it's very good. Hence, I put it on this list. And I'd advise you check it out too. It's definitely not something that should be missed. Okay, halfway there. Number 10, The Simpsons movie. I am a huge fan of The Simpsons, huge fan. I own the first 15 seasons on DVD, I got a bunch of merchandise from it, I've memorized so many parts, and have so many impressions of the character, Smithers! Smithers! I could go on through a whole video about that. The Simpsons is fantastic, and contrary to popular belief, I think it started dipping around season 12 and didn't get to the state it is until season 20. Most of the episodes of this show, up until that point, were fantastic. A real big staple comedy. It defined so many shows these days and became one of the most influential shows of all time. So, making a movie based off of this may have been expected for quite a while. But not only that, as they kept waiting longer and longer, it would have had more and more to prove. Because, the longer it goes on, the bigger of a reputation and impact it's going to have. So when you get the movie out about, 15 years later, it's going to be big. And oh boy, was it big. The biggest Simpsons thing ever. This movie has two great parts of it, the humor and the emotion. First of all, though, I gotta say, for both of those, the characters are perfectly on point. The Flanderization, as it put it, this is the show that created the term, it's nowhere in sight. Even Ned Flanders or Homer, the two most Flanderized characters. Ned Flanders is not an overly religious weirdo, and Homer, yeah, he's stupid, but he's got a lot of layers in this movie, and actually it's his stupidity that gets called out in this, so because it's acknowledged and treated like a problem, it itself doesn't become a problem for the movie. This humor in this is great, with the whole reason why the town gets polluted because of the pig silo and stuff. Spider Pig, of course, is great, although not the best part of the movie. No. My favorite parts, for the humor part at least, is when the Simpsons leave Springfield and they're going around exploring all these places. There's the motocross, and then there's the parts with the convenience store. It's all really great. It's all really funny. Of course, there's a lot of fan service with all these cameos of people if you look in the mob scene and stuff. And of course, then there's the emotion. Yeah, this is a really intense one. Not only does it really go in depth, actually the most in depth that we've seen of Bart and Homer's father-son relationship, but also with Marge and Homer. Now, we get a lot with Marge and Homer, of course, because they're the two main characters of the show. But this has one of the saddest Simpsons moments ever. Sadder than Bleeding Gums Murphy dying, sadder than Maud Flanders' death, sadder than Kirk and Luann splitting up. No, 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 no. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of spoil something that, well, not quite, but there's a part in this movie where the family gets fed up with what Homer's caused. So Marge does something, she records something on a tape. If you've seen the movie and you see what Homer saw Marge put on that tape and what the tape was and all that, that is such a sad scene. It gets me every single time. I don't like burst into tears or anything, but it does genuinely make me feel emotion. Probably the most that The Simpsons has ever made me feel. The one downside to this is that I want another one. Well, not with the state that The Simpsons is in currently, because right now it's just mediocrity, the series. But if we could have gotten another one, or maybe even like a Futurama movie, that'd be awesome. But as it stands, The Simpsons movie is absolutely fantastic and is exactly what you would expect The Simpsons to be on the big screen. It was fantastic, it was funny, it was loud, and it had a lot of really great emotion. It really was what we expected The Simpsons movie to finally be like after all these years. Number 9, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. My favorite John Hughes movie, and a big staple in my family, because every Thanksgiving after we're done eating, we always go straight to the TV and watch this movie. It's a very simple story. It's just about Steve Martin trying to get home in time for Thanksgiving to see his family while traveling with this really weird guy played by John Candy. While it's a simple story, the stuff that happens to them is insane, and it's really funny, like having to stay in this really crummy hotel, getting robbed in the middle of the night, having to ride in the back of a meat truck, going the wrong way on the highway and getting shredded by 2 semi-trucks, and having their car blow up on the highway. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much that happens to these people, yet one of them just keeps smiling and then the other just bottles it all up and eventually lets loose in a very, very vulgar, but still quite hilarious scene. Here's a funny thing about the movie, well, aside from the writing. The characters would not be nearly as good if they didn't get the actors to play them. Steve Martin and John Candy are perfect for these roles. The way they say these lines and their mannerisms and their facial expressions, if they had picked any other actors, no matter how talented for these roles, it would not have been nearly as well. They share a certain chemistry as well. Even though they're complete adversaries throughout most of the movie, they really work well off each other, whether it be through the emotional scenes or one of their huge and numerous fights. This movie also has a lot of little touches, too. Like with John Candy's character, Del Griffith, being a shower curtain ring salesman, when he accidentally steals Steve Martin's cab, in the water that when the cab drives away, you can see a shower curtain floating inside. Stuff like that. A lot of little touches in the background that make it really good to watch on rewatch. This is definitely a movie you gotta see twice or even 3 times to get all the jokes and see all the little background stuff. Then there's the deleted stuff, which I haven't seen all of it, but from what I have seen it, even that's really good. John Hughes was definitely on his A-game when he was coming up with this one. Let's face it, we all know it. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a great one. What else can I say? Next one. Number 8, Kubo and the Two Strings, the newest movie on this list, by far. Now, I've already talked about this movie before, so I'll try to make this one pretty brief. The animation in this one is some of the best I've ever seen. Best since, like, The Thief and the Cobbler. Now, Thief and the Cobbler was hand-drawn and this is stop motion, so it's different, but still, the same amazing details put in, the same breathtaking visuals. This is the greatest stop motion I've ever seen, bar none. They pushed the envelope so much on this one. Whether it be the red skeleton or Kubo's magic stuff or the villains look great. Everything looks great. This really is a powerhouse of animation. It shows just what the medium can do and even more. This is a very ambitious film and it paid off very well. Now, one thing this has over The Thief and the Cobbler is that the characters are actually very well done. Kubo was a very likable and an endearing protagonist. The monkey is a really stern but wise individual, really great character. The beetle is hilarious, but still definitely has a brain. He's not stupid, just, well, it's clear he's got some issues. The twists are great, every single one of them. Of course, the villain's played by Voldemort, so you can't go wrong there. He's a ton of fun. The movie is very dark, too. When it gets to the really dark action scenes, oh, those are not only breathtaking to watch, but they're just non-stop, heart-pounding action. The ideas of this movie are great. It's so creative with all the stuff it does. With all the magic and the creatures that they encounter, they're all great. Every single one of them is very unique and inspired. It's got a lot of Japanese culture in there, so you weeaboos will definitely like this one. But all jokes aside, it's very immersed in the culture. You can definitely tell that they knew what they were doing with this one. All the characters are memorable. This whole film is memorable, whether it be the visuals, writing, anything. This movie was masterfully done, and if you missed the chance to see it on the big screen and in 3D, you missed out. This film needs to be on the big screen. Hopefully they can re-release it, because it seemed like this movie did okay, so it wouldn't be that big of a chance, but people really need to see it. This is a movie that needed to be seen on a massive screen. But even if you're watching it on the small one, Kubo and the Two Strings is a fun-filled ride full of action, suspense, and really great heartfelt moments, and of course, breathtaking stop motion. Number 7, Mrs. Doubtfire, the classic Robin Williams movie. How could I not put it on this? Now, of course, as we all know, Robin Williams makes this movie. Like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, if you got anybody else to do it, it would not have turned out nearly as well. Because, well, Robin Williams is able to bring Mrs. Doubtfire to life in such a way that often I forget that's Robin Williams under that fat suit and makeup and wig. He makes Mrs. Doubtfire her own character. I mean, yes, sure, he's still Daniel Hillard underneath that, but Mrs. Doubtfire has her own different mannerisms, her own different voice, her own personality traits, even though she still wants the same thing that Daniel wants. Robin Williams was such a fantastic actor, and he was able to bring both these characters to life, and both in extremely different ways, again, to the point where they really do seem like different people, so you don't blame the Hillards for falling for it. And of course, Robin Williams' improvisations are all great, like when he's at the job center, showing all his impressions, and those little one-liners that I'm sure that he added, like the run by fruiting line. You can really feel the character's love for his family, too, that he's willing to go through all this craziness in order to help his family stay together and to actually be with his kids. And of course, that brings to the emotional side. The emotional side is great, and it really touches on the themes of divorce very well. Now, I myself am not an advocate of divorce, nor am I a product of a divorced family. But I know many people who are, but that's beside the point. This film does it in a very great way. That speech that Mrs. Doubtfire gives at the end of this is a very great speech. That's a very famous speech now, too. It's very nice, it's very comforting. There's nothing more to say about that part, of course. We all know that part's great. We all know the humor's great, of course. The writing is great. Everything about this movie is really great. Another thing, yes, it's an adaptation of the book. And yes, while it doesn't really follow it very well, I've actually read the book, and I don't like it. Yeah, I don't like the book at all. It's very disturbing. It's very harsh and aggressive and dark and not in any pleasant way. It's really just ugly and mean. And, like, he doesn't dress up to be Mrs. Doubtfire to see his kids, but more just, like, use them, sort of, in his pawn to get his ex-wife in big trouble, and it's... ugh. This film is the exact opposite of that. It has the same premise and same storyline, but it plays it in a much more lighthearted and, frankly, a bit more of a realistic way. If a guy really did have all these talents and all these motivations, he would do all this. All the scenarios he gets himself into, like with the home inspector and him having to put on the disguise of being both of them, going to dinner with both the head of the studio and his family at the same time, all sorts of stuff. It's a classic movie, and if you haven't seen it, I highly advise you to see it right now. But, as great as this movie is, it's not my favorite Robin Williams movie. No, that would be number 6. 1 Hour Photo. Now, I'm sure you people haven't heard of this one, and there might be a good reason for that. This is a disturbing, twisted movie. You know Robin Williams as the genie from Aladdin, Alan from Jumanji, and of course Mrs. Doubtfire, as we just discussed. But this is where Robin Williams decided to go through his experimental phase, like the Bicentennial Mans, the Good Will Hunting, and of course the 1 Hour Photos. One of his lesser known and probably most underrated movie. I actually heard about this one by watching a documentary of Robin Williams, and they just very briefly touched upon it, and it caught my interest just enough for me to go see it, just to check it out. So I rented the movie, and oh wow, oh jeez. This was crazy, psychotic, disturbing, absolutely insane, but yet also a beautiful, beautiful movie. Now, have you seen the movie The Cable Guy, the Jim Carrey, Matthew Broderick film about Jim Carrey who plays the deranged cable guy who's so lonely, and then because he talks nicely with this one customer, he all of a sudden thinks that he's best friends with him? Now, a lot of people don't like that movie. I think it's decent, but I always promote this movie to my friends and family as The Cable Guy done right. As this one is very lesser known, I'll explain the story of this one. It's about Robin Williams playing a man named Cy Parrish, who is a photo developer, which for those kids who don't understand what that is, back before digital cameras and smartphones, you had to take pictures with film and then get it developed. Now, he's been doing this for so long that he considers it a life, like a completely valuable, absolutely, no questions asked, important job. It's his life. This job is his life. He lives for it. But because of that, he has no family, no friends, nothing. And all of a sudden he comes across this nice little family, the Yorkin family. And whatever reason, he just becomes fascinated by them. He obsesses over them. He wants to be like their family. He wants to be not just like their family, but in their family. He wants to be Uncle Cy. He dreams of being in this perfect family that they have. So what he does is he takes copies of their pictures, takes them home, puts them on his wall, puts them in albums, and masquerades them as his family to whatever few people he comes across. He follows them around, he gets info about them, and then tries to shape his life to be like them. Now, this is all very weird and demented, but Robin Williams plays this character who is this sad, lonely individual that just has no life but to try to be part of this perfect family, which turns out isn't so perfect after all. He is so desperate, and he will do anything it takes. Of course, he can't tell them that, because even he knows, as someone who's deranged, he even knows that you can't just go out and tell them, but he wants them to just come out and reach out and accept him. But at the same time, he knows that that could never happen and that he always will be alone. But there's a shred of hope inside of him that keeps him going. It makes him want to really find the one true family, find his perfect family that he's always wanted and could never have, even ever since he was a young kid with his tragic backstory. But however, when he finds out that something is wrong with the family, well, it takes it personally. Actually, even worse than the family takes it. Because this family has been his life. They've been everything he thinks about morning till night. So he loses his mind when this happens. And does that get intense? Now, I hear a lot of people say that the climax was a little tacked on, but I don't think so. This movie was wow. And of course, this is a very subtle movie too, except for the last third, which is loud and bombastic, but which is supposed to be, but even so, this has a lot of subtlety in it. It doesn't directly tell you what Cy's backstory is, but if you listen to his speech at the end, you're gonna know what it is if you're old enough. There's also a lot of symbolism in there too, and they don't tell you what it means. There's a lot of people who really speculate on what's going on. I'm not going to give too much away, but he takes pictures in one part of the movie at the beginning of the climax, and then when we see them in the very last scene, they appear to be something different, something entirely different, noticeably. They're something completely different than he took pictures of. What does this mean? How did this happen? That's up to you to decide. And it's not one of those M. Night Shyamalan, ask me what it means things that he just throws in there. These actually have meanings, but there's several meanings out there, but it's up for you to decide which one is which and what is going on here. Of course, there's all Cy's dreams and stuff, which you're supposed to imagine what's going on. They're great. Now, if you are, say, under the age of 15, do not watch this movie. I repeat that. Do not watch this movie if you're under 15. Not just because of the violence or language or nudity in there, which, for the record, I don't, it's not that I fast forward through those scenes, but I just, turn the contrast down because I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. But whether it be all those themes or whether it be the actual themes of the psychological workings of this guy, you need to be an older person to understand, like 16 or older, to really understand the things that this guy's going through and what goes on through his head. Because believe me, I didn't do it justice through this description. Watching the movie, it's a thriller. It's not really a horror movie though, but the whole movie is psychoanalyzing this one character and the strange fascination he has. It's very disturbing, but also very sad. The ending is outright really sad. But I don't want to ruin it for you. If you're 16 or older, I highly recommend watching it. For those who aren't, let's just say you might want to keep this movie in mind for when you're older, because it needs more attention. It's fantastic. It's a very good piece of a character study. What more can I say? 1 Hour Photo. Next one. Number 5, The Truman Show. A very similar film to Ed TV, but hey, this one came out first and it's got Jim Carrey. Automatically better! But no, seriously. This one is a very, very interesting movie, like 1 Hour Photo, but you don't have to be 16 to watch this one. Of course, we all know the story about this guy named Truman, who's on a reality show, but he doesn't know it. Ever since he was a kid, he was brought up. He thinks life is normal, but ever since he was born, he was the star of a reality TV show. The whole world is fake, but he doesn't know it. And then he starts catching on. It's really fascinating. Again, not as super in-depth as 1 Hour Photo, but a lot more likable, I gotta say, because it's not so grisly and harsh. And actually, it did even provoke a mental psychosis. Some people actually do have what they call Truman Show syndrome, where they think that life is a TV show. Wonder if Mike TV has that. Anyways, Jim Carrey does a great job. He's not the weird, spastic weirdo in this one, but he's the more one I said, the quirky, everyman guy. And of course, he does start losing his mind though, but that makes sense. His world is pretty much literally falling apart. He's realizing what's going on here. He does a really good job in this, and it shows that Jim Carrey isn't just a spastic goofball comedic guy. He can play some serious roles really well. You really care for Truman. I mean, he's not the most developed character, but his scenario is just so investing. It's a movie unlike any other, really. I don't think it's been done before. If they remake it, it's not going to turn out nearly as well. Even though it isn't a comedy movie in and of itself, there are still a lot of funny parts, but really, the intrigue is the story. The story is just so fascinating that this evil corporation would just adopt a child, an infant child, and throw him into this scripted, televised world, and he has no idea about it until he's a full-grown man. And of course, there are people that try to tell him he's on TV, but they end up getting taken away. Just the lengths they'll go to keep the illusion, which really has no end goal except for money, but they're ruining this guy's life, and they don't care, but he doesn't know. It's a real hard movie to talk about without giving away everything, but I'm pretty sure you've seen it by now, but I'm just going to err on the side of caution. The climax of this movie is great. Really great. When he finally has had enough and he finally realizes what's going on, nothing's going to stop him from finding out what exactly is happening and to just be done. Even if it kills him, he's gonna win one way or the other. And of course, all the actors in this film are great. And I don't mean the actors as in the people in the movie who play Truman's friends. I mean the actors who play the actors. Oh, this is confusing. They're great. Not whether they play the actors or whether they play the characters of the actors that the actors play. Oh, jeez. You know what I mean. They're really great at, because when they're with Truman, they're entirely different people than when they're just without him. And whichever side they are, they're great. The villain, despite being a little bit generic, is actually a really interesting guy. Just his utter contempt and lack of care for Truman or really anybody around him. It's really fascinating. It's almost like a character study for with 1 Hour Photo, but it's also an environmental study. It's just a great film entirely. So, drink your Mococo drink and give it a watch. We're on the home stretch, people. Number 4, Batman Returns. Yes, I'm putting this over the original Batman for reasons I'll explain in a minute. But these next 4 movies, like I said, I could watch these movies over and over again, but these are the ones I could watch on loop and not get tired of them at all. So, Batman Returns took a very, very different turn than Batman 1989. Batman 1989 was dark, but it still was a serviceable comic book movie. This is dripping and oozing with Tim Burton goodness, and I love it. Now, of course, as we all know, Michelle Pfeiffer is a fantastic Catwoman. She was born to play that role. Michael Keaton still does a great job as Batman. And of course, Gotham City looks fantastic. Christopher Walken, although awkward, does a great job. But my absolute favorite character and favorite part in any Batman movie is the Penguin. Oh my gosh, this thing is awesome. Yes, thing, because he's more monster than man. Now, Tim Burton took a really interesting turn with the Penguin. He's not just a snooty aristocrat who just does a bunch of stuff that any common ne'er-do-well would do. He's got this really fascinating backstory. He was a deformed child from the family, the Cobblepots, who abandoned him because they didn't want to be seen with such a child. So he was thrown into the sewers and was forced to raise himself. And he was known as the Gotham City Penguin Man, often believed to be a legend. But now he resurfaces, and Christopher Walken's character is trying to use him as a pawn, but also the Penguin is trying to use Christopher Walken as a pawn. Now this character is fantastically done. He's so disturbing, so off-putting, so menacing, disgusting, vile. He's like this, he basically is a monster, whether it be outside or inside. On the outside, he's definitely got the monstrous appearance, whether it be the beak nose or the weird flipper hands, but the inside, he's a terrible person. And not just because he has no social skills or anything, but he has nothing but contempt for anything. He just wants to cause trouble, murder people, purely because he just wants revenge. Revenge for, well, being that horrible life he's had. Even though the people who did it are long gone, he doesn't care. He's what makes the movie so great. I wouldn't have minded seeing a whole Tim Burton movie based off of him. Because that's kind of what it is. It's not so much of a Batman movie as it is the Penguin movie. It's about him and just how warped and horrifying he is. And yes, he is disgusting, but that's what makes him so cool. And that's definitely what turns people off from this movie. Because he brings such a dark element into this film. But you know what? I love it. This is so Tim Burton. And I love Tim Burton most of the time. And what can I say? It was so well done. Yes, Batman is in it, of course, because it's called Batman Returns. It couldn't be called Batman Returns if Batman wasn't in it. And when he shows down with the Penguin or Catwoman, it's great. The action scenes are just as good as Batman Returns. The dark tone is very well done. Definitely a good direction that would have gone. Although Tim Burton would have made the next one a little lighter and had Robin Williams as the Riddler, which would have been awesome, they decided to make Batman Forever, and that did not turn out well. And then they made Batman and Robin, and we all know what happened with that one. So Batman Returns was a very good movie in my opinion. Definitely not for everybody. If you don't like this movie, I can totally understand. This is the dark nature, the Penguin's portrayal, whatever it be, I totally get it. But as for me, I can't get enough of this one. It's a very well done movie. And the best appearance of the Cape Crusader on the big screen, in my eye. Number 3, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yep, I told you this one was going to be coming. I've talked about this one for, how long was that video again? 1 hour and 42 minutes? So I'm going to try to make this one quick. Not only is it pretty much the most perfect adaptation of the book you can get, barring the Willy Wonka flashback stuff, which is probably what keeps it for the number 2 slot, the effects are fantastic. All the Oompa Loompas, they're played by the same guy, but you wouldn't really know that aside from the fact they all look like, because they blend so perfectly in there. They all look like they're really there. The sets, gorgeous. This really brings the book to life, and then some. The acting is phenomenal. The characters are amazing. They're all not only perfectly in tune with the book, every single one of them, but the child acting is really good. Whether it be Freddie Highmore as Charlie, Jordan Fry as Mike TV, they're all fantastic. They all do a great job. and they all have their own little mannerisms and characteristics that make it so enjoyable. The way they tell the story is really good. It's not just like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, everything's happy, cheery, which is fine for the movie, but this one, it has the happy feeling and a sense of optimism on the outside of the factory. The sense of the outside is like, everything's kind of bad going on right now, this world, it's kind of our typical world, but there's a gleam of hope. In the factory, it's the other way around. This place is nice, this place is happy, but there's a dark, sinister, looming feeling everywhere you go. It may be subtle, but it's there. It's undeniable. You can tell there's something off about this place. Just look at Willy Wonka. But in the end, the place is good nonetheless. The music is great. Danny Elfman, how can you go wrong? I've already talked so long about this one with Alfonso. I'll link to that video in the description if you want to hear us talk way more about it. So, let's just get on to the next one. Hurry, before I go on to a full speech. Trust me, it'll happen again. Number 2, Ed Wood. Yep, yet another Tim Burton movie for the list. This is the last one, though. So, Ed Wood is the story of the notorious filmmaker Edward D. Wood Jr., who made such movies as Bride of the Monster, Glen or Glenda, and the absolutely reprehensible Plan 9 from Outer Space. This is a very accurate representation of his life, too, just the only thing that's different is Bela Lugosi didn't swear like a sailor. Johnny Depp does a great job as Ed Wood, and again, you can barely tell it's him because he just immerses himself in the role so well. Martin Landau, oh, he was a great choice for Bela Lugosi. It's like he's back from the dead. Back from the dead! Whoa! And is walking around on screen again. Again, it's just that one little mannerism. This film perfectly represents the life of the worst filmmaker ever, even worse than Uwe Boll or Tommy Wiseau. Because this guy always went with the first take. He always had the most minimal budget, and the people who were in his film were the people who financed it, pretty much. But he's also a really interesting person because he believed he was making art. He believed what he was doing was comparable to his hero, Orson Welles. But no matter what he tried, he just couldn't get what all the people were saying through his head, and therefore his dreams kept getting crushed repeatedly because these films turned out really badly, as we all know from his cult following. It's also a really self-aware movie. Like, there's a part, I'm not kidding here, where Sarah Jessica Parker actually asks the people, because she reads a review of her performance in the newspaper and says, "Do I really have a face that looks like a horse?" Because, you know, it's a common joke that Sarah Jessica Parker has the face of a horse. And then they're also saying, like, what color, since it's shot in black and white, which is a really nice touch because this takes place in the late 40s, early 50s, they'll hold up two dresses. Hey, which one do you like best? I like the gray one. Get it? Because it's black and white. And the thing is, they don't draw attention to these things at all. You have to really listen for them. They bring people like Criswell to life perfectly, like I said, Bela Lugosi, and all the little things that happen in the pre-production of Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is, I only mention that one because that's one I know best of. I watched like a bunch of documentaries on that and read up on the history. They got every little detail perfectly. Like the doctor who Ed Wood thought looked just like Bela Lugosi, but in fact looked pretty much nothing like him at all. The fact that Vampira didn't want to talk during the movie and that the church got involved with manipulating the movie, even changing its title from Grave Robbers from Outer Space. It was really, really good, and like I said, a very good representation of it, and even tells you what happened to the people after that. Not the actors, but like the people they're playing. Very well done movie. It's definitely a must-watch for any fan of film, whether it be good film or this. It's funny, it's got charm, and it's a very informative piece on what happened with the worst director in the entire world. Well, folks, that was all 19. Time to get to the big one. Now my number one favorite movie, UHF. This one will probably surprise a ton of you. How could I put something like UHF over movies like Kubo and the Two Strings, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Ed Wood, or anything like that? UHF just seems like a little low-budget movie starring Weird Al Yankovic. Which, yes, it is, but this film is one of the funniest, if not the funniest film I've seen ever. For one, I love Weird Al. Anything he touches turns into gold. Even back at the Barnyard, that episode he was in. He made that episode, which was pretty bad at first. He made it really good just appearing. And of course, it's got Michael Richards in it too. Oh, that's great. It's just a simple story. A guy takes over a TV studio. And then look what happens to that. They get shows like Wheel of Fish, Secrets of the Universe, Raoul's Wild Kingdom. Oh, that part was so funny. Every single joke in this one is laugh out loud hilarious. And that's just the stuff that they mention just outright. There's a bunch of stuff that goes on in the background, a bunch of really subtle stuff. One, I hope you guys don't mind if I ruin it, but hey, there's a ton of these that go in the background, so I hope you don't mind. There's a scene where Weird Al, his character, he goes into the Channel 8 studios, which the guy who's in there is notorious for being just an awful, awful man. He goes in there and, like, there's the office, of course. There's, like, staplers going off, there's phones ringing and machines buzzing, and he goes, "Hey, RJ!" Everyone turns to look at him and everything freezes. But then one subtle thing is that all the noises, like all the phones ringing, all the machines, the staplers, they just stop. Everything goes dead silent, nobody moves, everyone, like, freezes. Like, maybe even in, like, midair. It's one of those kind of movies. A movie that doesn't really have any semblance of logic or cohesion, but it's a very creative movie, a very out there movie. It's definitely not a critic movie, like all the critics couldn't stand it apparently. But I think this film is hilarious. I've seen it at least 30 times, and I'm going to keep seeing it more and more. I can pretty much recite the entire movie. This thing is so off the walls. It's insane. It's hilarious. Of course, Weird Al had his handprints all over it. Even the deleted stuff was fantastic. I can't think of a single problem with this thing because it's just so well done. Yes, there's a lot of references to, like, 80s culture. There's stuff like Indiana Jones or Rambo or, like, a bunch of talk shows and stuff, but it's done in a way where even if you don't know what they're parodying, you can think it's hilarious. Like, I saw this way before I saw First Blood, and I thought it was so funny, but then after I saw the movie, I thought it was even funnier. Of course, Weird Al makes the movie, but Michael Richards' character, Stanley Spadowski, the phrases, his mannerism, he's basically Kramer if he got hit on the head with a brick like 100 times and then just kept on walking, just going on. He says weird things like, "I worked here for 30 years and then they just tossed me out like an old moldy bag of tangerines." And then, like, the movie's filled with a bunch of lines like that, where they just throw it into random sentences and don't even really pay attention to it. This thing is filled to the brim with comedy, and it's even got some nice heart to it. Like with Weird Al's character trying to cope with his imagination and finally prove something with himself, and of course his relationship with his girlfriend Terry. I'm not doing the film justice by any means. If you're a Weird Al fan, I would say go see it, but let's face it, you'll probably already have. For those who don't, it's a must-watch if you like to laugh. I first saw this when I was in, I think, 6th grade, and I loved it, and I love it every time I watch it, because I always notice a little something new that goes on in there. This film is definitely one to be admired, and it's definitely my favorite movie of all time. So those were my top 20 favorite movies, but now some honorable mentions. The original Addams Family movie, which, yes, I do like it, but of course, not nearly as much as Addams Family Values, and I didn't want to put them tied, because I only had one tie, so yeah, I kind of had to leave that one off. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie, very weird choice to put on here, but hey, I love classic SpongeBob. And of course, it's got a lot of great laughs, it's a classic movie, and it's got even a great heart, like with the scene in Shell City, as we all know. Jumanji. We all know what's great about this one. Let's just hope that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson can actually replicate it well. I don't have high hopes, but we'll just have to see from there. Tim Burton's Corpse Bride. Very great music, very great animation, nice story, albeit with some weak leads. And Misery. This one was just barely cut from the list. Oh, it was so hard, but this was the honorary number 21 spot. You know, the adaptation of the Stephen King novel. Oh man, this one was great. Kathy Bates does an amazing job bringing Andy Wilkes to life. The whole tone is very, very well done. Another great one. Well, folks, thank you so much for all the support you've given me, and I'm not going anywhere. Stay tuned.